Howdy, welcome to the second video in the onX Hunt e-scouting series. And in this video, we're going to go through building a target package. Now, in this video, my goal is to simplify something really complex. And in order to do that, what we want to do is kind of break it down into smaller chunks. I see so many people who go out to go e-scout, or they just get burnt out. They don't want to e-scout because it's just too much. They don't know really where to start. Or what they need to find out, or like all these things, what they should be looking for. And so anytime you have a complex problem, I like to just take it and break it down. So in this target package, we're going to break it into 3 phases. And you're going to have, the top phase, which is kind of the unit level. Now we're going to go into area level, and then phase 3 is kind of the drainage level. And we're going to go through a lot of different things on what you should be looking for and what kind of information or data you can be collecting to make your life easier to figure out what you want out of a hunt and how to make it a successful hunt. Sounds like a lot, but I tried to break it into a simple system that you can kind of follow. And the best part about this system is it gives you the ability to go through scout, go to the units, check it out and see what you know or don't know, what intel you can develop, and then reorganize your plan. And so this is kind of like a 1, 2, 3 step process. Now, a lot of you are going to have this already intuitively in the back of your head. You're like, this is what I do anyway. Maybe you pick up a tip or two, or maybe like you clarify something. So I hope you get a few tips out of it. Worst case scenario, best case scenario, I hope you get a full system and something that'll kind of help you take a really complex problem like finding elk, hunting elk, all this stuff, and make it simple and in a chewable format, so to speak. As we go through this, there's going to be an accompanying document. You can find it in the description, or we'll put it somewhere. And essentially, like, I built the entire target package in the Notion file. So in the first video, I mentioned the Notion file. You'll have an entire target package. You can go through and add your own key elements, your own data, your own intel, all of these things to your Notion document and make it yours. So you can follow along with the Notion document, or you can just kind of go through the series. And it's up to you. You don't have to. So with that said, I'll be kind of going back and forth between the Notion doc and some of these slides to help you understand kind of what we're talking about. So if you are a visual person and you want to see the document, you want to see this all laid out at once, go check out the Notion document. I think there's a ton of really great value in it. All right, let's dive into it. All right, so within Notion, we have the target package. And I guess it's worth noting that we should probably talk about what is a target package, and kind of sounds like a military term, but in essence, a target package refers to a collection of information and intelligence related to a specific target. In our case, that's going to be elk, and this could be deer, it could be whatever. And for this purpose, we're trying to just make a place where we can kind of put all of our intel and all of our data into one place. This is also going to give you kind of a reference sheet to go, okay, what do I need to go find out? Because I think a lot of times it can be overwhelming. Like, do I call someone? Do I talk to previous tag owners? All these things. And so this is kind of a good reference to say, okay, at this stage, here's what I like to find, and maybe you can go and find that data as well. So that's what a target package is. And like I said, this is the target package within Notion. You guys will have access to this, and you can kind of make it your own, change it how you want. Totally up to you. So each phase, I said we're going to go through a 3-phase target package. Phase 1 is kind of choosing the unit. It's the broader picture. Now, a lot of you are already going to have units that you hunt, but maybe you have a state like, I don't know, Wyoming or Montana, or parts of Oregon, or some of these states where you can hunt multiple units. So choosing a unit is going to still be kind of pertinent information. So, the first level is the unit level. The second level is kind of choosing an area within that unit, still narrowing it down, but we're going to talk about, like, okay, here's the area, and this is where my search is going to start. This to me is actually the most important, and we'll get into that in a minute. But then we're going to go into more specifics and talk about that drainage level, really fine tuning and figuring out which drainages we want to focus our efforts into, either scouting or hunting. So that's kind of our target package. We got a bunch of information to go through. If you want to follow along in the Notion document, go for it. Otherwise, let's kick it off. All right, so let's break it down. So in phase 1, this is pretty high level stuff. This is unit specific, right? So we're just trying to figure out what unit in a state we want to go to. I use a lot of this data as I'm putting in for states. So this is kind of my overarching, do I want to choose this unit? Do I put in for this unit? Those type of things. but a lot of you may have, say, a Montana general tag. And even with a Montana general tag, you still have to make some decisions on where you want to hunt, because that's open to a lot of different units. Same with Wyoming. You still have to kind of break that down. And I do see people getting a little bit scatterbrained on that. And so, these are kind of the big picture items that we're going to go through. So again, we're going to break it into our three categories, which is the personal parameters, the target parameters, and then our historical data or intel. So first and foremost, let's dive into the personal parameters. Now, the three kind of really important ones to me on this are just the type of hunt you want. Like, I think that gets so overlooked, and we're so busy like, what's the best unit I can get? But I think starting with what hunt do I want to go on, or what type of hunt do I want? As we look at it, like, there's a lot of different type of hunts. You can go, do you want to be in a hunting lodge? Do you want to be a truck camping? Do you want to be in remote? Do you want to spike out? Is this a horseback hunt? Like, what type of hunt are you looking for? And those kind of things matter. And I think in choosing a unit, yes, do you want all these other specifics about elk? Like, sure, I definitely want to hunt a unit where elk are. And I like to get, a good population, so I have at-bat opportunities. But I think first and foremost, as I choose, a lot of that is based on what type of hunt I want. So within the next piece of choosing a unit, it's kind of like our target parameters. Now, this is kind of a broad overlook of it, and we'll get much more finite and detailed once we start looking at areas and stuff. And so kind of the base of the elk parameters, right? Like, we all know that elk basically need food, water, and security. Now, that's glossing over a lot, because most areas have those things, and I've been to a lot of areas that had all three, but no elk. So it's important to really scrutinize some of these things as we look at, like, what are we looking for? And, looking at security. I think security is a really important one. When I look at a unit, when I'm thinking about choosing a unit, it has less to do with, how remote it is, because I don't necessarily think that is security in and of itself. But it's like, is there places where the elk can hide, or pockets or whatever? And so if there's road systems in every square inch of a unit, I may struggle to find security in that unit. But in the same vein, if it has very limited amount of public land and it's kind of all in one chunk, and I know that there's going to be a ton of pressure in that unit, then they also don't really have security. And maybe the security is more just them being on private. And so taking into consideration these things, like, yes, all the units that I want to look at, they need to have security, food, and water, but at what level, right? And this kind of goes into the type of hunt you want. And we'll get into a little bit more of that on how, like, food and water and types of things, like, where are they feeding? How much water is there? If there's tons of water, if my goal is to sit water and ambush elk, then tons of water is not really good for me. So, like, these are kind of just things to think about as we go into the unit. But as I think more broadly, I'm looking at historical data and personal preference. Like, these are the two categories for me in the unit selection that I'm going to focus more on. So, we're talking about populations. Like, if you are out there to hunt elk and you're just looking for a 6-point. So to back up, a lot of what I teach in my elk hunting course is centered around being consistent. It's how to kill a 6-point bull every single year. And so what I'm talking about for this e-scouting is going to be catered to that type of hunter. So if you're looking for age class or genetics, these are a little bit different conversations, and we can kind of talk about those. But for the most part, I like to think most people are just like, hey, I want to kill a 6-point bull every year. And so when I think about how to be consistent, how to kill your bull every single year, population matters. And we'll get into more of that. But I still need a good population, because I need those at bats. I'm looking at things like the balance between population, tag numbers, and maybe harvest statistics. I don't put a ton of weight into harvest statistics, but it's something I'm going to reference and say, like, oh man, 5%, that means the unit's less than average, and I tend to think that if a unit hovers in that 10 to 20% success rates, I should be able to make it happen. That's kind of my take on it. But again, that I don't really put a ton of weight into that. I'm more looking at like a balance of security, population, and the type of hunt I want. Is it a huntable place? And so those are kind of the key focuses that I focus on. But I want to dive into a little bit more of, say, the art of balance. And I think a ton of people miss this. So when I think about what unit I want to go to, instantly people think, oh, I want high populations and I want tons of access, right? But I want you to imagine that these are all sliders. And every time you move a slider, it affects another slider, right? So if I have a unit that has huge elk populations and lots of access, guess what magically comes with that? You magically get the pressure slider because there's going to be a ton of people focused in that. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule, which is low tag numbers. But usually, if you have high elk numbers, great access, and no pressure, aka low tag numbers, what you magically get is like points. It's going to take you 15 to 20 points to get that done. So these are all sliders. Now, again, I'm going and talking straight to the people who are interested in killing 6 points every year. I think if you want to be in that category, you want to find that balance. You want to find a healthy population with a good amount of access, but maybe not like tons and tons of access. And, you want to find lower tag numbers, right? You're trying to find that lower pressure. And so you're really balancing these like with, how many points you can get, can you get the tag? And so this becomes a balancing act. Now, for the guys that are looking for age class, the best way to find age class is to lower that access down to like almost zero. And you can even lower the populations. You can take a unit that, let's just say has super low elk populations and not very good access. There's probably a good chance that there's some bulls that are being able to get old in there because it's just a very hard place to hunt. Now, the flip side of that, again, we went back to like high populations, high access, easy to get, lots of tags, lots of pressure. That's just a magic switch. So as you think about this, in a unit selection, it's important to remember that there's a balance here and you got to find those units. I think it's really important. One of the mistakes I see is I see a ton of people trying to elk hunt the best tags. And I do think for the most part, a lot of people need to get better tags. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to hunt premier areas, let's just say premier tags, you're not going to get a ton of them, right? And so you're not going to get that many at-bats or learn from. Most units, and I'll use Montana as an example, Idaho is very similar. Most units you can kill a 6-point bullet. Like it's not overly difficult. Now, how big that bull is varies a lot, but I think most people don't really care. They want to be hunting, bugling elk. And most people don't want to be around other people. So it's like, I tend to lean on finding those overlooked units that have a good balance of access, but security. That switch is definitely, those elk, if they can go to private and they can get away from people, a lot of times those are a lot less pressured elk. So, you have the elk that just act different. So to me, it's like, if you want to hunt, you want to kill a 6-point every single year, find that good balance of a good healthy population, maybe an increasing population or an over objective population. And then you want to find, areas that you can get away from pressure. Like what can you do to get away from that pressure? Okay, I want to jump into the notion because there's a couple things in the notion I want to touch on. So up top, we have like the key variables. Again, it's kind of the things I touched on. It's type of hunt, population, and pressure. Those are the key variables when I think about choosing a unit. Next, if we dive into these personal parameters, it's like what type of hunt you want. So you can look for whether that's, you want to be on a camping vacation and you don't care, you want good campsites, or you want to spike out, or you want something, horseback or those. There's a ton of different options there. So you can play with those. There's a cost of points. That kind of matters in a lot of places. Like, can you get the tag and can you hunt consistently? There is a lot to be said for being able to hunt a unit multiple times, getting to know that unit, to know the area, and being able to fine tune this process that we're going to get into later. And then able to avoid pressure. This is the key to me. Like when I look at a unit, the first thing I do is like, can I get the tag? And then can I get away from people? But to me is like security is number one on the elk parameters as far as food, water, and security. Security is number one, and it's not. I do not believe that it's just being remote or backpacking and outworking people, because outworking people is really tough. But those are kind of the key parameters, and you can kind of fill these in for yourself. Historical data, there's tag numbers, harvest, all that stuff. So this will help you kind of choose. a unit. That broad, we're starting super broad, and these are the pieces that we want to find out. And I will go through a little bit more, and we'll start to fine tune that as we get into phase 2. All right, so phase 1 summary. Let's talk about it. Personal parameters. My biggest one is what kind of hunt you want. Type 2 is security. Can the elk get away from pressure, and can I find that place? Can I get away from pressure? Is a big piece of it. Now, number 3 is increasing an increasing population or a stable population. Does it have a healthy population of elk? And that balance that we're talking about between tag numbers, hunting pressure, and elk numbers. Like, that's kind of finding that sweet spot is a great balance. You don't need to draw the best tag in the state to kill a 6-point bull. I promise you can kill a 6-point bull in most units in the state if you can get away from pressure and find those pockets to hunt that match your hunting style. So that's the summary for phase 1. All right, so phase 2 of the target package is really kind of diving into what part of a unit, what area do you want. Now, I want to kind of specify that you can be hunting multiple units and have 2 different areas, but this is going to kind of just be narrowing down into a geographical area where we can kind of put a hunt plan together, right? And so this could be in separate units, and that happens a lot of the time. For me, a lot of times, if I'm able to hunt multiple units, I may have an area over here and an area over here. And so I want to not just say like this is within a unit, but this is kind of, this region of a unit is kind of where I want to focus. And this will make a lot of sense when we start putting hunt plans together and stuff. But we're going to dive into like, what is the target package we can build to kind of specify area. Also, this is probably, to me, the most important. Like, finding the area is more important than the specific drainage. And I'll get to why in a minute. Probably even more than the actual unit, right? Like, choosing the right unit is important. Man, choosing the area is probably the most. And a lot of the reason that is because you only have so many days, and especially on a hunt you can't scout. This becomes very important because you have limited time. And choosing the wrong area can be the difference between success and failure. So this is my system for putting together a target package and really deciding on which area to start pouring over. And again, we're gonna dive into like actual e-scouting. I'm gonna show you what I'm looking for in features. The point of the target package is to kind of put as much information together so I can figure out what to be looking for when I get to my rough e-scouting. Again, I hate to repeat myself, but a lot of you guys are going to know this, and some of this is going to be pretty intuitive, but I'm hoping you guys pick up a tip or 2 along the way. All right, so phase 2, again, we're going through our 3 categories: our personal parameters, our target parameters, and our historical parameters. I want to jump into the notion. I made a couple notes in here. So some of the key variables to phase 2 is going to be your hunting style. We talked about what type of hunt you want in phase 1. Now it's going to be your hunting style. Are you a caller? Are you a spot and stock guy? Are you kind of in the middle? Are you sit and wait ambush? And the reason that matters is because it's going to really play into what type of features we're going to be looking for as we put together our rough draft and our final draft plans. So really important is like, what kind of hunt do you want to be? What kind of hunt? What style of hunting is going to best suit you? And if you don't know, then that's probably something you should figure out. And actually in my hunting course, like I talk a little bit about developing your style, developing your system. And so that's if you want more information on that. All right, so the next key variable is going to be mobility, assets, and limitations. This is going to be a big one. So I know a lot of you, we all like to jump into the map, start looking, and then we realize we're 10 miles in and it's too far. We find the perfect honey hole, but it's 10 miles away from the truck. So mobility assets are going to be, whether you have horses or a boat or a raft or mountain bikes, dirt bikes, ATVs, all of those things. And these are going to be, what is going to get you outside of most people. Now there's a caveat to that because anyone who's hunted with, say a side-by-side or an ATV knows that doesn't really get you away from any people, but maybe that access is the next piece. This can come into as far as distances too. If your limitations are, you don't want to kill an elk over 3 miles, that matters. And we need to set those parameters. And when we get into e-scouting, I'll show you how to do that in a really clever way. But just working through like, what are your assets and what are your limitations. It's really good to be clear with yourself and say like, okay, I really don't want to kill an elk over 5 miles. I'm going to be by myself. It's going to be mid-September. I know it's going to be hot, so man, that is really pushing it. Ideally, I'd like to be in that 3 mile range. And so just setting your limitations and your assets. The next key variable is going to be access and assets realistically, but access is going to play into the type of hunt you want, right? Again, going back to, if I'm a guy that just loves aggressive elk calling and that's the only type of hunting I want to do, stuff that has very limited access and can be remote is not really going to be beneficial to me, because I can't cover enough ground for that tactic to be efficient. So like, just thinking about what type of access, what type of hunting assets you have that you can bring to the table, those type of things play into what my hunting style is. So jumping into the target parameters, like what are we looking for, what are elk looking for, what features of the map can we find that will help dictate if we like that area or not. And depending on the hunting style, this may change what you're looking for, and I can kind of give you some examples of what that looks like. But so for target parameters, I'm going to say edge habitat, burns, elevation, a lot of those things that you have the ability to kind of search for in onX. And a lot of people know about burns. They like to find the burns, right? And you're finding that edge habitat where the burn meets the timber. And that's a great place to find elk. That's the habitat they're looking for. And so like, these key features are able to attract those animals. Edge habitat, I think of edge habitat as like anything that people would refer to as like, oh, that's really elky or bucky. And a lot of it is like either where two types of trees come together, or you have that kind of sparse open where there's feed, but then there's like cover. And in those type of habitats that are going to attract elk, given there's no pressure issues or security issues. And so those are the type of things that we're looking for. Elevation is a big one. I think this goes unmissed. And I'll get to it in a second, because as we get into the historical data or intel, is like, what can we learn? What can we like sit down and chart to figure out? Well, this is where I think calling the biologist is one of the most important things, not necessarily for like the drainage level, because rarely do you get good information when you ask a biologist what drainage to go to. You're going to be there with like 100 of your best friends and their dogs. So it's not that, and it's not great intel, because they're getting that question all the time. Where you can really benefit from someone like a biologist is just asking them, what elevation band did the elk tend to like in that September timeframe? That gives you huge insight, and that's something they should know, and they would probably tell you, but nobody else is asking. So it kind of gives you like a little bit of intel into something that most people aren't thinking about, and kind of get away from those other people. Another one is like neighboring units. Let's say you have a unit, and on this side of the unit you have, or on this neighboring unit, you have a unit that has almost no elk, no harvest statistics, all of that. And on the other side is the unit that takes 20 points and has trophy bulls. Which side of the unit do you think you should be on? Like, obviously that neighboring unit is going to impact it. Now, that's not always the case, but it's a great place. It's a great piece of data to have to kind of look into and say like, okay, I should lean towards this unit, and maybe there's good populations there. The same could be said for like wintering, winter ground survival and stuff. And so if you look at maybe a unit has elk that move to two different wintering grounds, and you talk to the biologist and say, hey, how was the wintering ground recovery? In this place versus this place. And they're like, man, this got hit hard, but actually the elk over here did pretty good. Well, you can kind of put together the pieces like, okay, this end of the unit should have more elk than this end of the unit. So simple things like that. And again, you can jump into the notion, and this will give you kind of like a reference to pull from to say like, okay, here's the type of data I should be looking up and trying to figure out. Another one within areas, like, again, this is why I think this one's so important. Talking to previous tag holders, this can be so big, because most tag holders, depending on how good the unit is, they probably won't tell you, what drainage to go to. But they might tell you that we got a lot of success, or we found a lot of elk on the west end of the unit, but we didn't see anything on the east. Like, just that simple statement cuts your search in half, right? And that, again, going back to like, if we want to set out, 5 days worth of searching, that's the difference between being successful and not. Like you could spend 3 to 4 days wasted on one half of the unit that may not be the right side, and then you don't have time to hunt the other side. So simple things like that. Previous tag holders can be huge when just determining an area, because a lot of times you can get that information versus say specific drainages. If you're like, hey, is no telling creek good? Probably not going to tell you. So like just getting that more broader information really help you. And once we start putting together plans, you'll see why that makes a lot of sense. All right, so going through this again, what type of hunt are you going to be successful at? And this gets into hunting style. What's your preferred hunting style? Is it glassing? Is it calling? Is it soft calling? Is it aggressive calling? All of these types of hunts are going to change what specific features you're looking for. And so as you go through your Notion sheet, go ahead and like fill in, say like, oh yeah, I'm a big caller, I'm a soft caller, like I just want a spot and stock. And then you need to match those types of features that you should be looking for. All right, let's give you guys a couple of examples of like those key map features. So here are listed out. It's kind of like there's glassing, there's calling, there's spike out, those type of things. So if I was looking to go on a hunt where I wanted to get into elk, I wanted to call elk in, like that was going to be my jam, then I'm looking for good access and mobility. That's super important to me. I want to be able to get around the unit. Remote doesn't really matter as much. I'd rather be into a bunch of different elk and have a lot of options. I'm not necessarily looking for open glassable country. I want the opposite. I want huntable timber. So I'll be looking for timber. I'm looking for those north faces where I can get into elk midday, maybe off the back of something. I'm looking for those type of features that are, let's say, 1 to 3 miles, from the truck, maybe 2 to 4 miles from the truck. That's going to be that balance we talked about of security and features. And so like that just gives me an idea of what I should be looking for as we get into like perusing the maps and trying to find stuff. If I want to go on I'm glassing hunt, I'm like, hey, I want to go in this area. To me, the things that are going to matter are like ridge systems, glassing knobs, the glassable terrain. Those are going to be the most important to me because I want to be able to cover as much ground as I possibly can and be able to glass as much country. And so like I can't have super thick country, obviously. It's going to be not very effective. So same, if I wanted to spike out and I was like, I'm going to have camp on my back, I'm going on an adventure, maybe I'm going to do some soft calling, I'm just trying to get into elk. In those type of situations, I'm going to want more just good trails. Like, you're not going to be able to cover a ton of ground if you're bushwhacking the whole time. So, finding a good trail system that has, multiple pockets of elk or possible pockets of elk features, that edge habitat, those are the type of things map features that I'm going to be looking for. I'm looking for travel corridors, like where are the elk coming from and going, those type of things. And so that's, depending on the hunt style that you want, it's going to dictate what features we're going to start looking for. So just to give you kind of reference, again, this is a good reference sheet, maybe give you something to think about instead of trying to go out and say like, what's elky, what's bucky, and just peruse the whole map. All right, let's jump into phase 2 summary. Let's break it down. So number one, first and foremost on the personal parameter side is style of hunting. I keep beating a dead horse, but it's what style, what kind of hunt do you want? That matters because what features we choose later. When it comes to the target parameters, it's habitat. And, does that habitat match the style of hunting that we are looking for? That is super important. So maybe one side of the unit is very thick and one side of the unit is not as thick. Given that they both have elk, then maybe we choose based on that system. Like, can I get away from people? Does it have the habitat? Does it have the huntable terrain? And we're going to get a lot into in phase 3 is like huntability is huge for me. So number 3 is historic populations. I can't tell you how much this gets overlooked. Calling people and figuring out is the populations there. And it's so simple to ask a biologist like, hey, what side of the unit historically has better populations this time of year, X hunt, whatever, whether it's October, whether it's September, whether it's November, like figuring out, okay, like where historically are the populations at? And word of mouth comes in big here too. Like I can't tell you how many times, you hear, oh yeah, so-and-so talking about a hunt, they did well. And just keeping a mental tab of all that word of mouth and knowing like what side of a unit can be better than another. And once you have narrowed down what side of the unit you want to hunt, you can effectively and efficiently go and set a system to like, okay, we're going to search this unit. And if there is elk in there, then you will be successful. You're going to get into elk. So those are the kind of the three core things, three core categories. And then my keys to success for phase 2 and choosing an area. Does the access match the hunting style? That's a big one. I think it's overlooked. Everyone wants a remote hunt, but honestly, if you're going calling, I hear everyone say they only want to call in elk, but then they try to go remote, and those two just don't really mesh super well. Does the habitat match your hunting style? Again, if you want a glass but you're hunting thick timber, not going to match your hunting style. And then historic proof. I think it's fairly easy to get historic proof of animals, and that can tell you a lot. Like, I know it doesn't mean everything. Wolves come into an area, areas change, a lot of things change, but I think it's worth getting that information. Has there historically been elk in this area? Is this a decent area in the past? Once we go in there, we can confirm or deny pretty quickly, but it's worth getting the historical information. All right, let's dive into phase 3 of target package and building your target package and selecting an area. And phase 3 is kind of the drainage level, right? So we're looking at like, what drainage do we want to go actually hunt or scout, search, whatever you want to call it. And I think this is where the art really comes in. And I'm going to nerd out because I know you guys are going to make fun of me for this whole like systems thing, but I really do believe like once you build a system, you can go and search these units. Like if you were looking for your keys, you would go room by room and you would search, and you'd start with like the most likely place and you'd work backwards. So you wouldn't just go check. Well, maybe some people would just go check the laundry room or check the kitchen or whatever. You're like, okay, you creating a system for searching. And I think when it comes to animals, you can kind of do something similar. Like, okay, here's the key places that I think have the most likelihood, and how do we efficiently and effectively search for animals in there, and how do we check this one off the box and move on to the next. So when it gets to drainage level, we're gonna dive into the personal parameters, the target parameters, and we're gonna talk about historic data. Now these change a little bit, and I'll kind of show you why. But historical data kind of turns into more just package intel. And so from the personal parameters perspective, we talked about type of hunt, we talked about hunting style. This is huntability. Now this is so key, and almost everyone looks over it. But this is the difference between what I think is the greats and the people who are not successful. The consistency, the people who kill a 6-point every single year, they know how to hone in on very huntable areas, places that can get it done. And if you're a bow hunter, you know this very well. You can go bow hunt places where you see tons of animals, but getting a kill is going to be super tough because they're just not very bow friendly areas. Now, like, think about that in the same context. I think you can kind of relate that to hunting in general. So in the personal parameters, we want to talk about the most important things, which is huntability, route efficiency. And I know that's so cheesy, and everyone's going to cringe when I say that. But man, route efficiency is one of the most important things. Like, how fast, how efficient can I get from one place to the other, from checking one drainage to another? And then proximity, as we start to lay out all these features that we're looking for, if I start laying out glassing points on the map and I notice that there's a cluster of them here or a cluster of features that I like here, obviously I want to kind of hone in on area, because one of the worst mistakes you can make as a hunter is trying to bounce around too much. Like, if you got one hunting spot on this side of the mountain and you're going every day over there and then back here, like, you're just burning too much time. To be efficient and be effective are two different things. And so you need to be efficient and effective. And so effectiveness is doing the right thing, and efficiency is doing it well. So you really want to focus on creating these hunt plans that are very efficient. And I think it's important to like kind of map those areas and figure that out. So that is the most important thing when it comes to choosing a drainage. Is I may find tons of features I like all over the map, but at the end of the day, if I want to try to put together a hunt plan or a scout plan, it's going to be very efficient. How do I hunt 6 different drainages off one ridge? That's super powerful, right? And now I have 6 different hunting holes. So that's kind of like when you get into like the personal parameters, is like, how can we be efficient and effective? target parameters. This matters a lot less to me as we get into the drainage level. By the time we get to area, we're choosing bucky or elky areas. We're looking at the edge habitat, the huntability and those type of things. We're looking at water and feed, of course. Like, we're not going to hunt somewhere that doesn't. And so the only thing that would matter in that is kind of proximity to everything else, right? Are they using it? These are things that again, I've talked about this. Just because it has feed and water doesn't mean there's elk there. The elk are where the elk are. The deer are where the deer are. And so it matters a little bit less unless it goes into your hunting style where you're like, man, I want to sit water. I've had this in New Mexico where we found some great elk and there was one water hole within like 5 miles. And we're like, yeah, this is perfect. We'll sit water because it's a very limited, amount of water. Still didn't work out, but if you can find those limited resources, that's the only edge case where I'll be like, man, this drainage has all of the pieces. We definitely got to check it out. So again, slope and direction, and we'll get into the view shed and stuff. I know people are huge on north faces. I can't tell you how many elk I've killed that are not on a north face. I don't put a ton of weight into it unless I have a specific hunting style and I'm like, okay, I really want to target these north faces. I check the box. I care a little bit, but I don't let it be the end all be all. And same with like slope. It's pretty, I would say, common knowledge, but elk tend to like to rut on those 10 to 30 degree slopes. And that's a great thing to look at. And I'll show you how to do that later in the view shed and find those slope angles, but it's something that I look at after the fact. So I may do all my research to figure out the area. I may even figure out the drainage, and like the deciding factor may be like, well, I kind of like this north slope, or man, this whole drainage has a ton of 10 to 30 degree slope angle that's north facing, or whatever. And so like that may be kind of like thing that pushes me over, but it's not necessarily something I'm like, oh, that's a north face, let's go check it out. So just food for thought. I know people have a different opinion on that. Some people only look for north faces. To me, it's like more of a deciding factor. And then when it comes to drainage selection, again, we talked about the efficiency and effectiveness, but I think when you get into like the intel, this is where, if you've hunted the unit before, previous sightings have pretty big weight, right? Like if you can map out all the elk you've ever seen in the unit, I think it can kind of give you a new perspective. And I'm surprised at how many people never do this, to kind of keep a folder. We talked about the folder. So I keep an entire folder of all the elk I've ever encountered. And it's interesting when you take everything off the map and only have that folder, you start to recognize some different patterns, right? And so that's really important. Same with sign, whether it's rubs or wallows or those things. Like, you start taking stuff off the map and you just put your wallows on. You take stuff off the map and you put rubs on. And you start to see some patterns, taking note of what slope, what angle all those rubs are on. And then how do I rinse and repeat that in a drainage next to it, a parallel drainage or something along those lines. And so again, we're just trying to make it as efficient as possible. A long time ago, I remember I had, probably 2 or 3 spots in this unit that were very similar, but I was bouncing around. I'd have to drive an hour and a half to go hunt this one spot, and I'd drive an hour and a half and hunt this spot. And, later in life, when I got good at e-scouting, I was able to like map out, okay, what did that look like? And it wasn't, a half mile or a mile away that I was able to find places that look very similar. So it had like the same features, right? And I'm like, I almost guarantee there would have been elk in there. I never went back. But, how do you map those features and say like, okay, these are the features we're looking for to be successful. Let's figure out where they are on the map. A great example of all of this, to get on a tangent, is a few years ago, we had a hunt in Idaho. And my friends and I, we looked at the map. We had horses. So, that was kind of one of the features we were looking for to get away from people. I had specific features that I was looking for. And I could tell you, it was just like a timber density that I was looking for, that I knew had been successful in an area that was of similar elevation and hunting style in Oregon. So I was like, I wonder if we can map this to this state. And so I'd go to the old unit that we used to hunt and look for terrain features that were similar to that. It's not even edge habitat. It was like just thin timber, right? and then places we could see it from. So canyon distance, that huntability, I was focusing in on that. And, I don't want to say we threw a dart at the map because it was very selective in what I was choosing. But we had never been there before. And I, had multiple plans. We had 3 areas. We went in, and actually the very first area we went to ended up between that and another area, but we ended up taking 3 bulls in 3 days. The best part is we were able to go into an area and hunt it based on e-scouting, take 3 bulls in 3 days, and then we rode out with 3 6-point bulls coming out in front of the outfitter camp. And I don't know, personally, I took a lot of gratification out of that. I hope they all got their elk as well. There's no shortage. But my point is that by kind of doing this system and saying, like, here's the features that I'm looking for, I was able to go to Idaho and we were able to fill all the tags and come out pretty heavy. So, it just shows, I think it's definitely possible, and a lot of research goes into it. And even you look at all these people who say they throw a dart in the map, there's a lot of research and a lot of research that goes into what they're choosing and that spot on the map that they're choosing. And that kind of gets into the art of it, right? I can say that elk need security, water, and food. How many times have I told you that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to run into elk? Because there's an art, right? And the art is finding that balance between elk numbers, security that you can hunt, that edge habitat, the huntability. That's the key thing, is like finding areas where I can be successful, knowing that when I go in there, I'll be able to hunt this canyon this way. Those are huge things. And, some of the overlooked things in the art of finding the perfect spot, I think a ton of people end up hunting pressured elk. It goes back to the slider rule. If you go to high populations, high access, you tend to get, high pressured elk. Those are things that kind of get overlooked. And usually it's not until you get there and you're just battling with people all week and you're like, this is dumb, I'm going home. And so I think you can kind of avoid those things. And I know that sounds crazy, but you can avoid a lot of those by just looking at the map and being conscious about what you were looking for on the map. Again, understanding transitory elk. I had this problem where, just because there's elk there today doesn't mean they're there tomorrow. And if you're hunting these elk that maybe move, 5, 10, 15 miles in a single day, those can be very tough elk to get on and to hunt. Again, let's just cross out huntability. If elk are moving 15 miles a day, those are very tough elk to get on, to kill, or, just to be successful. And so those are really important things. And I think the obvious one is people like to hunt where there's no elk or where there used to be elk. Just because there's sign doesn't mean there's elk. So a lot of things change. We talked about wolves. We talked about hunting pressure. You just never know. And so to combat all of those, it is an art to kind of developing your system, but I think it's super, super important. All right, let's talk about phase 3 summary. And then I got one more special note that I didn't have in my elk hunting course, but I added. So phase 3 summary, let's touch on it. Route efficiency. That's number 1 when it comes to the hunter parameters. Number 2, now this isn't necessarily like a habitat thing, but huntability. I keep hammering it. Like, is the terrain huntable? Can I be successful there with my hunting style? And then when it comes to historical data, this is more intel, but it's getting eyes on. It's like, what have I seen before? Where have I seen it? Maybe you spring bear hunted and you were seeing a bunch of rubs, and that type of information, that firsthand data, is really, really important. There's a bunch of things you can go into as far as biologist again, word of mouth again, like all of these things, and they're important, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a little bit tougher to make that decision. And most of my decision when it comes to actual this drainage or this set of drainages is based on huntability and route efficiency. Those are the number 1 and 2 things that I'm looking for. And a lot of like the slope and the angle and those things are secondary or tertiary to those pieces. So what are my keys to success for drainage selection? Effectively and efficiently searching an area. Can I go into an area, scout it or hunt it, and know whether there's elk in there or not, right? Like, I don't want to be bouncing around. I don't want to be spending days in a place I don't want to hunt. One of the worst mistakes you can make is choosing a spot on a map. And I've done this, 5, 10 miles in, and you spend an entire day getting there just to find out there's no elk, and an entire day getting back, which we'll get to in a second on my next piece. But Is the terrain huntable? Like, can I be successful in this terrain? I've seen a lot of people choose areas, and I'm guilty of this too. Google Earth, or even the 3D images within onX Hunt can look deceptively convenient, right? But like sometimes that area is just massive, and those mountains are much bigger than you thought, and it's not really feasible to hunt them. So is the terrain huntable? Is the map showing good proximity? Again, are these like pieces I can hunt effectively between? Like, can I manage this amount of travel between the areas I'm looking at? And then gathering in the field data. Now, the thing I want to touch on this is like, this system is like, okay, we have all this data. I'm going to go out and ideally scout these routes. I'm going to know whether these routes are effective or not. Maybe you select a route on a map and you get there and it's like, man, that took me too long. It's 6 hours to get through there. It's not feasible. And so you go back and you kind of rework your data. This is why, as much as I love e-scouting and it solves a lot for me, and it's be able to be in the woods and all those things, or not being able to be in the woods, it also, you kind of have to go and do the thing. Like, you have to check the places and check them off the box, or what have you. Sometimes you can do that on a hunt. If you don't have the ability to scout, it is definitely like, we talk about this in my elk hunting course, is like, there's finding elk and there's hunting elk. Those are two different things. And you have to be able to efficiently find elk. And so this, phase 3 leads right into my elk hunting course, where it's talking about you need to be able to find how to find elk efficiently. And so like, this is going through and testing all these hunt plans, these routes, these things. And you should be able to get through those hunt routes and figure out if there's elk there or not. And then we'll decide if we can hunt those elk, right? Or how to hunt those elk. But at the end of the day, like, this is the 3 phase. This leads into the last thing I want to touch on. And I didn't put this in the elk hunting 201 course, but I do think that I will probably add it, because I found myself this year when I spring bear hunt, and I was joking with a buddy who I said, this kind of goes against everything I'm teaching as far as effectiveness and efficiency. But I think we all, as hunters, have this desire to, we find a place on a map and we just got to go check it out. Like, I have those places, you have those places, we all have these places that just like scream at us. They don't make sense. They're not effective. They're not efficient. They're a nightmare to get to, and there's only one spot you can hunt, and maybe even like one little corner you can see. None of it makes sense, but it's what I call the honey hole theory. And I think we all kind of need that honey hole in the back of our head. We're like, man, this is the spot. There's got to be a 400-inch bull living in there for sure. I just got to get there. The difference is that I think it's important to have those. I think it's important to trust your gut intuition and to have those. I think too many people hunt ineffectively by having only honey holes. So, they're like, "Ooh, let's go here." And they go in and then nothing. And then they go over here and then nothing. And so it's a balance. I 100% believe I have killed a lot of stuff in random honey holes that I thought were going to be amazing, and they worked out. But I've probably hiked into 5 times as many that had nothing. So I think it's important to trust your gut, to go off your intuition. I think it's important to give yourself a honey hole, put it on the map. Maybe you never even go to it, but it's there. And this year I was e-scouting an area that I'll be hunting this year that's totally new, and I can sit there and I can say, this is the best way to hunt this unit. I can search here, here, here. I can systematically check off the boxes with 2 scout trips and be pretty dialed for hunting season. But there's still this one little spot I got circled that I'm like dying to get to, and it doesn't make any sense. But I think it's important to have. We'll see if I actually get there or not. But I do think giving yourself the ability to have a honey hole is fairly important. All right, so let's wrap up the target package summary. Again, what do I want you to get out of this? I think the important thing to get out of this is like understanding what features you're looking for based on your hunt and your hunting style. That's super important. Breaking it down into 3 chunks instead of saying like, I need to look for elk in unit 1, 2, 3. Breaking it down into like, okay, what area of that unit do I want to look for? And maybe we could back up and say, I need to find elk in Montana. That's super difficult. So let's break down what we're looking for in a unit. And once we find the unit, then we can say, okay, let's check these areas of that unit. I think these map to my hunting style and my preferred hunting method. And then we can say like, of that area, how do we kind of hunt it effectively and cover the most amount of ground? And whether that's a scout trip or a hunting trip, You could go on a scout trip and say like, this is good, this is not good. Here's what I found. And again, like that adds so much data. You can kind of keep building on that. This happens even throughout a hunt. Like I'll go on a hunt and generally speaking, I'm wrong. Like plans, my first 3 plans fail, but I can go now and repeat that process while I'm on a hunt, sitting on my iPhone or my iPad, and I can like say, okay, what did work of these plans? And maybe just knowing what didn't work is good enough, but like what did work? What are we seeing? What new data do we have? And then how do we build a new hunt plan on the back of that? So what is the new intel that we have? And so it's kind of a rinse and repeat. It's constantly figuring out. Most of my hunts are that way. I could go on a hunt, a great example, a caribou hunt, which my hunt partner and I went on a caribou hunt, and it took us, we got into animals day 1. And then we really struggled, right? And so we got into animals. The dart we threw at the map was good. We kind of had an idea. And so then we just had to basically like work backwards and say like, okay, how do we get away from people? Because that was the hard part, is that the animals we were into were moving way too much and there was too many people and these things. So it's like the new plan became, how do we just get away from people? What pockets can we fan that are still huntable? We can't really just out hike everyone, because the tundra, it's really tough to even get a certain mile. Getting over 5 miles is a little bit difficult. And so you had to rework the plan on the fly. And I think that's the really important thing. It's like we go back and say like, okay, let's go to what area, based on the information we have, what area, what drainages, what's our hunt plan? How do we figure it out? How do we just systematically start checking off the boxes and learning as we go? And that's usually what happens. Rarely do I write a hunt plan and I show up to a unit and it works out. The one time in Idaho, but that was it. And that probably one of the million. So, just thinking about those things. So that's kind of what I want you to get out of a hunt package, and also give you kind of a reference sheet of what kind of data or intel you can be gathering, and maybe give you some information on that, like who to talk to, biologists, things like that. So again, go check the Notion sheet. It'll have the entire target package in there, and you can start filling out for yourself your hunt style, your hunt methods, and what kind of intel you should be digging up. And again, you can go, call a biologist. Here's the questions you need to ask. Here's the information you want to get. Here's the historical ranges, those type of things. And again, I think there's some stuff in the Notion doc that I didn't update. And also the nice thing about the Notion doc is a living document. I can update it as I go. If you guys have feedback or want some changes, we can add it to the Notion doc as well. So be sure to check that out.